Okay, I think we are live. Hi, everyone. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Maternal Health Conversations web series once again. I am your host, Jennifer Petty, and I am so excited for the Dad's Takeover today. Seriously, we have 4 dads with us this evening for tonight's episode entitled, Dear Dads, You Are Appreciated Too. So for those joining for the first time, I am a public health leader and I am the reigning Mrs. Georgia American. This will likely be my last episode before I crown my successor on June 25th. I have committed my year-long platform to maternal health, as this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I survived life-threatening complications after birthing my daughter in 2021, and I'm just really passionate about empowering moms, dads, birthing people, support people, healthcare professionals, policy leaders with both awareness as well as resources. Now, when we talk about maternal health, it's really uncommon, I think, at least from my perspective, that we hear from dads. So tonight, as you can see, they're here, they're ready, and they're taking over the conversation, but just for tonight. So are y'all ready?
Yes, we are.
All right. First up, we have Malik Marshall. So Malik, if you would please just tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. So glad to be on here with everyone. I think this is just an excellent, topic to discuss. And thank you for having, the dads to give their point of view. I'm a very recent first-time dad. Our daughter, my wife, Tess, and our daughter, Isla, was just born 2 years ago. She was born in 2021. So she is now 2 years old, just recently turned 2. I am truly like a girl dad, doting over her all the time, learning everything. I do get to work from home, so that's very helpful as far as being able to just witness a lot of her development and all the new things she does. It seems like, every other day, basically. So I'm just truly enjoying this whole journey. It's been nothing but a blessing. Not even sure what else to really say. I've just been like happy and enjoying fatherhood for the first time. And it's just been the best thing ever for me.
Awesome.
That is awesome. Thanks, Malik. Jason, you're up. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Jason Petty. I am married to the wonderful Jennifer Rutledge Petty. Thank you for inviting me on. She doesn't let me speak very often, so. I am the father of a beautiful 2-year-old little girl. Her name is Jayla Ann Rose Petty. She was a pandemic baby, so it was kind of going through all of the pregnancy process in lockdown, and then finally she came, and she has just turned our whole world around. There's nothing like walking into a room and she's right there. Hi, Dad, and says it about 4 or 5 times in succession. I respond back each time. So I know every day when I come home, somebody's gonna be happy to see me. Awesome. It's just amazing being a dad. And so I too, it's my only child, and so I'm in the girl dad club, and it's a special club. One of my mentors, he told me right after we found out, he was like, I'm gonna give you this bit of advice. He's like, it's gonna be great for about 12 years. He's like, and then just try not to kill her, and then it'll go back to being okay when she gets about 25. So right now I'm still in the honeymoon phase, still loving every minute of it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jay. Tavari Taylor, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, Tavari Taylor. I'm a husband to my beautiful wife, Dana Taylor. Have 5 kids. Really enjoy, being around the kids, raising the kids. I'm also a business owner, and I'm also a community advocate. And I guess one of the bigger things I like for you all to know about me, I'm a big people's person. I really enjoy helping people. And that's pretty much Tavari in a nutshell right there.
And last but not least, we have Travell Travis.
Once again, Jennifer, thank you for having me on. We're friends through Jason, who he and I have been friends since first grade, and so it's an honor to be on this platform with you tonight. I'm a girl dad 3 times. I've been married for 17 years. I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 14. She just completed middle school. My second child is 13. She'll be going to 8th grade. And then my youngest is 5, and she just graduated pre-K. So thanks, Jason, for that advice of letting me know that I'm about to go through the tribulation period with 2 of them. But at least that it'll get better on the back end of things. And so I'm grateful to be here and to talk about this important matter.
Thanks, Javel. And thanks to each of you. Thank you for saying yes and agreeing to join this conversation. You are all amazing dads. Each of you have shared some of your maternal health story, either with me directly or indirectly, which is why you were top of mind when it came time to select panelists. So thank you. I know some of you have navigated pregnancy-related complications with your wives, children. Others may have witnessed complications as a result of their work environment, but each of you, I think, brings great depth to the discussion, and I'm just really excited to jump in. So with that said, how's fatherhood treating you? I mean, are y'all good? Give us the tea.
I mean, I'll go first on that one. Fatherhood it's a challenge, to be honest with you. You know, and I know there used to be a joke back in the day. Things heard about but hardly ever seen, and the answer's supposed to be fathers. You know, I was that person growing up without a father. You know, so when I had my first son, to be honest with you, I was terrified because I didn't know really what to do, how to be the father. I had the absent father. But what I did in reflection of that, I did everything I could do to change what I didn't have. So with that, like I said, it's a challenge, the ultimate challenge. But at the same time, with it being the ultimate challenge, is also the ultimate pleasure that brings a lot of meaning to life for me.
Yeah, I can piggyback off of that. Oh, sorry. You want to go, Jamil?
No, go ahead.
So I mean, for me, I grew up, with a single parent household as well. I've always been in, communication with my father. We lived very far away from one another. But just the lack of the physical presence and not truly like a male figure consistently around me, I wanted to make sure that when I had a child, that wasn't happening with them. I want to make sure, the presence, and also, of course, all the doing and the communication and everything else, but just the presence of being there is big to me. So, I love the fact that I'm around my daughter so much, and I'm able to do a whole lot with her, and, that she just knows me and sees me all the time, and just feels very comfortable around me growing up. So that's like a really big deal to me. So, it's kind of like almost taking what, could be a negative and switching it around. So I want to make sure that,
Exactly.
not to say all bad things about my, my dad, nothing like that, but just the fact of that lack of, being around, and, those sometimes months or whatever, or sometimes even years of not really being around. I didn't want that at all for my child. So, so far so good. And I'm going to make sure I continue along that path. And that's just a real big, deal for me with my daughter.
That's great.
I'll go. For me, once there's like a moment where everything kind of changed, and I knew it was going to be different having a child, but really it's kind of the way this change in priority. I think I was thinking about all the responsibility, just the work. Oh, I got to do this, got to do that. But really, it's kind of a whole different outlook. I went from being Jason to so many people now. Oh, you're Jayla's dad. And that is a big part of my existence, and I'm proud of that. And it gives me motivation. I go into work each day with this extra motivation, knowing that, oh well, I want to meet this need for her. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to provide this. And it really kind of gives this extra sense of fulfillment that I didn't anticipate before I became a dad, because I don't think it's something that you can experience until you become a dad. So exactly. So that I think for me is the biggest part of it, and it's something that drives me a lot, and it's very rewarding.
I'm similar. My parents separated when I was two, divorced at 3. So trying to figure it out on the fly. I'm grateful for some of the fathers I was able to observe from a distance. Jason's dad was a tremendous influence, growing up in the community. But having girls, they're like fine china, very valuable. But at times you got to handle with care. You want them to grow up and be confident and be independent. And you want to try to shield them from some of the negative things that they're confronted with. And, you got to be careful, sometimes what you say and what you don't say. And, because you don't want to damage their confidence or not give them the attention and the time that they need. And so it's a tightrope. But it's a rewarding one, especially as you see them grow and excelling, both spiritually, academically, well-rounded, well-behaved. It definitely has its rewards to it.
I want to ask, in case there are dads who are tuning in, who also grew up either without a dad or grew up with a dad who wasn't as present. Specifically Malik, Tavari, Travell, like what resources would you suggest, or do you have any suggestions or kind of words of encouragement for them to kind of, become the great dad that you all have become?
I was going to say for me, I kind of tend to look at, it's just been 2 years so far, but I kind of tend to look at this as being the toughest job that I'm just always going to love. I mean, it's like, as tough as it is, there's never any complaining. It's just kind of like you just want to do more and more. Much to what Jason was saying. Maybe this is just truly like the father portion of it, but I'm always thinking about her future. I'm always thinking about ahead, like what needs to be done, how to make sure I have this ready for her, that for her, and all that stuff. So, and I try to like make sure I don't be so much in the future that I forget about the present, because I want to enjoy the present, being with her. But it is a constant thing. And I think, just in general, as fathers, as men, I think we're used to trying to like take on responsibility, make sure, secure, it's just part of our nature. I feel that way. That's how I feel. And I would say for, any of these young men or, older men who may have, just be experiencing, fatherhood for the first time, let love guide it. Let love guide everything, because it's innately, this stuff has been going on for, at the very least several thousands of years, maybe even longer, right? As far as like humankind, reproducing and continuing on, right? Like there's something to it. We have like all these, all this technology and all these things that help us out nowadays, and they didn't have none of that stuff back in the day and they still survive. So it's innate in us to be able to, handle these things and to actually have just a natural affinity to be able to handle these things and take on. And I always just remind myself, it's weird. It's like when you think about the enormity of raising like a whole human being, you're like, but when you just take it a day at a time, they're just other human beings, just like us. They're just people. So everything kind of fits like a glove, and you just kind of let guide, let love, kind of like guide you the whole way, and everything kind of falls into place.
Now I'll follow Malik. For me, it was finding that positive role model, and I will say this, and sometimes you have to go through one or two, because the one I consider my role model was a family member, was married in the house with his wife and kids. Unfortunately, he had some bad habits, so I had to, go from there to look elsewhere. And make a longer story short, I end up finding it in someone that's not even in my family. It's a guy we used to grow up playing basketball with, a old head as we would call him. But he took myself, my brother, and a few other guys who didn't have a father in the community, took him up under his wing, and he was more like a mentor to us. So that was very imperative for me, or to me, in that situation. And then, like as we said before, you know, find the good from those situations. You know, even the first one I said that wasn't the best, I was able to take things from that family member, you know, and a couple other people, and including the guy who was outside of the family, and able to kind of put all those things into, I guess, what you would call like a melting pot. But you know, melt it all together, melt it down, you know, and take the pieces and make a, I guess, maybe a good life pie out of it, if that makes sense. You know, so that was the thing to help get me through, because I think back, you know, I mentioned earlier, when my first son was born, you know, I was terrified, but I did have a few little things to kind of fall back on, you know, so that helped me out tremendously.
For me, I also had the men in the church that I looked up to. I also, my father-in-law is a girl dad of 3. So sometimes my wife would share with me things that he would do with them, not necessarily comparison, but it was some best practices. And you still have to customize it to your family. You have to customize it to the specific needs of your children. Forums like this are so important, because sometimes you do feel like you're in a battle by yourself. You're isolated. You're trying to be the ultimate provider, and sometimes that's and Jason alluded to that. As a man, your job is to be a provider, but at the same time, you can, you know, provide them with perhaps a certain standard of living, but then fail to give them a certain life. And trying to figure out, okay, I have to work because I want to give you the best, but then if I fail to give you the best of me, then what have I actually given you? And trying to figure that out sometime is the hardest thing, because to be always available means I'm probably not working, which means you don't get to wear what you want, travel what you want, eat what you want. But then if I'm always working, then you get to enjoy those things, and I'm not there with you because I'm still at the office or I got something else to do. And so I'm still trying to figure that one out, how to be present and a provider.
Makes sense.
So Malik, you wear a lot of hats. And I don't think you mentioned during your intro, but one of your many hats includes being a highly sought after DJ.
Highly sought after, I'm not sure, but yeah, a DJ.
So what I want to know is, what songs would you identify to kind of sum up fatherhood in your perspective?
Oh wow, this is a unique question. I like this. I don't know. I'm trying to think of, like, I know when I made a playlist for Isla's party, I was trying to be real clever. I had, like, you know, the first 4 songs started with the first letters of her name and all that stuff. I do know, like, the second one, and I love to play this all the time, is was it Donnell Jones, You Know That I Love You? I think that's just like a really sweet song. That's the whole thing about being present, you know, just being all about enjoying, like, the moment, I think, with your daughter. I'm a big, you know, Stevie Wonder fan, so of course the Isn't She Lovely is big. You know, I love the fact that even just hearing, you know, at the very end, like the baby crying kind of takes me back to when she was, like, born, and all that type of stuff. But yeah, I think, you know, any type of song that is about, like, being present. You know, Travell just kind of alluded to the fact of, you know, trying to find that balance. And as men, we're always, you know, on the grind. We're trying to, you know, think ahead and, you know, get that money and provide and secure and all that type of stuff. But you can't get so caught up in things that you actually forget, you know, the actual, you know, being in the presence of this person you love so much and enjoying the time, you know, with him or her, you know. So it is a good balance. But, you know, any type of song that's about, like, really enjoying, like, the moment, and appreciating the moment. To me, that's always, like, really big, you know. So I got to start incorporating some of this stuff into my sets. Thanks, Jennifer. You put me on the spot, but that's a good thing to do.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. It's a good thing, you know.
I forgot to mention that one to you.
It's all good. I liked it.
But that was a great answer. Thank you. All right. So next, Travell, as you know, there are so many families hoping and praying for children. You may have come across, men in your church or ministry who are trying to hold on to hope that they will be dads one day, after each miscarriage or after each doctor's appointment that may indicate infertility. And like Malik, I don't think Travell mentioned in his introduction that, he does serve as a bishop, one of the several hats that he wears. So my question for you at this time is, for men who find themselves in this predicament, with Father's Day approaching, which may be a tough time of the year. And as a bishop, as a husband, as a father, how do you encourage someone in this situation?
Wow, that's a phenomenal question. One of the things that our church has done for 10 years is host a marriage conference, Covenant Keepers Marriage Conference. And normally at that conference, we give space for people to, what topics or what questions would they like addressed. And infertility is one that comes up every year. And, we have been trying to figure out kind of how to address it or who to address it. And so last year, we kind of approached it really from 4 different standpoints. We did deal with the possibility of adoption, especially looking in the African-American community, how many children are in the foster care system and end up being adopted by non-Black families, and sometimes families who have political agendas to almost, I'm going to get in trouble, experiment on our children. And so there's a need for African-American families to consider adoption. We also talked about medical procedures, and it actually ended up being in our own family. One family adopted another family. They had to do the in vitro fertilization, and they talked about the pros and cons of going through that process of in having the fertilized eggs and frozen, and what do you do with them and all that kind of stuff. And then we also had couples who God worked a miracle, that in their 40s, thinking maybe they're going through menopause, and no, they're pregnant. And some, whether they had been unable to conceive, some who had several miscarriages, or stillborn children, and God made a way. And so I say to those who deal with that, one, keep praying. We serve a God that performs miracles, but also recognize that maybe there are other ways in which God may want to use you to be a parent, whether it's through adoption, whether it's through foster care, whether it's even just children in your own family that may not have the mom and dad and the structure. Can you feel that void? We talk about godparents. We recently had someone who, as a late teen, lost both her mom and dad over the course of her lifetime, but her godparents ended up adopting her as a older teenager, and they couldn't have children, but now they finally got the daughter that they never could have, and she has the parents that she so critically needs at this stage in her life. And so I think keep praying, but also be receptive to the answer that God may give, which may be, hey, I got a different purpose for you in this regard than maybe what you anticipated yourself.
Good.
Awesome.
Well, I like that response, Travell, because I guess that kind of emphasizes, how being a dad is often about being flexible. Mm-hmm. And so just kind of being willing to listen and go where God may lead you.
Absolutely. And the one couple I mean, if you look at the twins, no one would know that they didn't give birth to them.
Mhm.
You know, and
See that?
so they end up, it actually ended up being two were twins, and then they had a younger sibling because the mother, you know, had issues, mental health and drug addiction. And basically, rather than splitting that family up,
Mm.
they were able to keep the family together
That's beautiful.
and give those children who would have been separated, raised in a dysfunctional home, you know, a godly home, loving parents, and they grew up as brothers and sisters because they were biologically brothers and sisters. And so, you know, there are pros and cons to adoption. It can be expensive, but you know, I think looking back on it, they're just as happy, both the children as well as the couple, that God allowed them the unique opportunity to step in for
Mhm.
children who otherwise would not have had and that could be a certain level of gratification in that where would these children have been if God had not allowed us to step in and take and give them a home. And so that becomes a whole ministry and a whole level of love, and you know, love by choice, and you were selected. I mean, it takes it down a whole nother pathway.
Awesome.
It is. It's beautiful.
That it is.
Mic drop. So 1 in 10 fathers suffer from postpartum depression. Typically, when we talk about postpartum depression, it's typically associated with the mom. But 1 in 10 fathers, data shows, actually suffers from postpartum depression during pregnancy, as well as the postpartum period. Parenthood, as we know, it brings change, and it can have its highs and lows. So it is critical for dads to take care of themselves as well. So I want to know from each of you, what does self-care look like for dads?
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead, Jason.
I'll start. Self-care for me is kind of taking those moments. It doesn't have to be something big, but I like spending time outside. So it may be going for a walk. I think, you know, during those periods, shortly after our daughter was born, I lived pretty close to a driving range, and I'd go over and just be swinging and hacking at balls. And that was something that I enjoyed. It was a good source to kind of get some exercise and relieve some stress. And then finding time for yourself also, I think, is important, because you know, you're still an individual, and so you still need to stay connected with your crew. So you know, there were days where, you know, I've kind of asked my wife, okay, hey, is it okay if I just go watch the game, get some wings? And so those were important. Those moments helped a lot.
And I'll follow Jason. It's funny you asked that, Jennifer, because I don't think I personally, I speak for myself. I can't speak for other men on the panel tonight, but I've never looked at it as a thing of self-care, right? As long as I was providing for my wife and kids, making sure they had what they had, to me, that was the caregiving, right? So I think at one point I looked at it more as providing as accomplishments versus self-care. Now I will tell you this past year. Now something I've always liked to do was to go out on hikes and stuff like that. And I put my dream board together year before last, and one of my biggest things on that dream board in the corner is self-care. But I put that because I hear about that, but I never really knew what is self-care, what does it look like for Tavari? You know, once again, I got back into the things, you know, and I call it grinding, work, provide. You know, but lately what I've been doing is finding hiking trails. I put together a list of 22 trails, you know, and it is my goal to go to each one of these trails. You know, it's funny I say that because I hadn't hit one of those trails yet, but I was going to take a trip about a week ago. Traffic was bad. You know, I ended up turning around, and it was like, you know what? I'm going to find a trail. So I was in commerce and up finding the trail in commerce. You know, so that's my self-care and something I've done before. And this may I guess what I'm looking for is, I don't know, trying to pull out that brain fart, but it may go against what I just said. Now, one thing I do is I like water. Now, I tell y'all, I don't like to go to the beach, the ocean like that, not like that. But for me to go sit on the lake, at the lake or whatever, but to me, once again, I didn't look at it as self-care. It was, you know, I'm going to kind of thaw out, you know, the events of the day, you know, or if I'm upset, that's my release. So even though I didn't look at it, you all, as self-care, in the same breath, I found my way, my vehicle for self-care, if that makes sense.
Jennifer, I appreciate you sharing that statistic. I had never heard the 1 in 10, but it is a lot, because you doing that initial period and having to support your spouse, but they're trying to figure everything out, especially if they are, you know, well, everybody got that initial period of time that you know, and then you then if they're nursing and if they're up around the clock, I mean, so you got a lot going on internally, externally. You know, she's a different person. You know, now you got this other person invading your space, invading your time. You know, you're sleep deprived. And so I echo what Jason said. I think that time of exercise, you know, prayer and reading, and having that outlet, whether it's watching the game, that positive outlet, because you can be physically present, but emotionally distant or detached.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're in the room, but if your mind is somewhere else, or they're talking to you, you're hearing, but you're not listening. You know, you're at the table, but you're distracted. You know, you're not able to give your spouse or your children the best version of yourself. And so, you know, if you got to get up early, you know, one of the reasons I became a morning person, really, I had to try to get up before everybody else did to try to get that exercise or that prayer time in, or stay up late after everybody's going to bed to try to get that time in. And I always share with people, really, you with self-care, you need God time, you need spouse time, you need family time, and you need self time.
Mm.
So even if that's 4 weeks in a month, you know, you got to make sure you spend your time with God, spend your time with your spouse, because, you know, it could easily get to where you spend so much time and attention on the children that you neglect yourself.
Mm.
And then that creates problems, because if the nest is not right, then the chicks fall through the nest. I mean, if y'all fussing and fighting and bickering, then that creates a hostile atmosphere, stressful atmosphere for the children. So that date night, even if you can't go out on a date, you know, you have to be creative. Okay, we're gonna watch one episode of Good Times before we go to sleep. All right, there's me and you, baby. All right, we're gonna watch Different World rerun. You know, sometimes it just comes down to that few minutes of just, may not be quantity time, but quality time to keep the nest straight. And then you got to spend your time with the children. And if you have multiple children, that's collectively, but also individually, because they all have their own unique personalities and needs. But the foundation of that is you have to take care of yourself. Someone told me that if you don't take care of yourself, somebody will marry your wife, raise your kids, and move into your house.
Mm.
So if you want to be around to get old with your wife, raise your kids, and live in the house that you work hard to pay for, better slow down and take care of yourself.
Perspective.
Yeah, that's a good one, Travell.
I'm still trying to figure out the right speed, though. I'm still working on it.
Now you got us all going out to pump weights and go jogging tonight, you know?
No, I mean, and it's funny, you know, Tavari, you know, he's kind of making a joke out of it, but it's so true. I mean, what Travell said makes so much sense. I mean, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm still kind of like, you know, trying to figure out, you know, when it comes to kind of like the ultimate way of taking care of myself. I need to get my timing together. So, and recently, kind of at my job, I got a promotion, and the work that I'm doing now is slightly different than what I was doing before. Everybody knows once you get like promoted in the position, there's always that adjustment period. So even though it's been probably like, a little over 6 months now, I still feel like I'm doing a lot of adjusting. My job now, I deal, I work in marketing, and I'm dealing more so with the content now, with the writing again. I used to write a whole lot, in college and, back then. And so now, when it comes to writing, it takes time. You can't just, take a chunk of like 15 minutes or 30 minutes and just get everything done with writing. Sometimes it really takes time to kind of get it right and, to go through the process. So I find myself, work can take up a lot of time. And what I started to do was I'm like, okay, you know what? I know I work from home, so I get more work done. That tends to happen when you work from home. You don't deal with traffic and all that stuff. But for me, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to cut off at this time. I had to like learn that, when, the pandemic started, we started working from home. And initially I would just be working like crazy late. Oh, I can get this done. I can stay on and do that. And, it just takes up all this time. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So now it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I cut off at this time regardless. I can get the rest done tomorrow. So what I need to do is with, the evening time, I'm able to do a pretty good job of making sure I help out with my wife and, of course, spend time with the baby and do whatever we do. But what I need to do is kind of like what Travell said. I need to, when it comes back to, making sure I'm, physically in good shape and everything. And because I used to run all the time. My wife, she puts on races. Everyone, kind of like knows that she puts on like 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, all that stuff. And I used to do a whole lot more running before Isla came and before even before like the pandemic happened. So I've gotten that kind of out of that. What I need to do is get back in that. And unfortunately, I'm not a morning person, but I think I'm going to have to become a morning person, Javelle, just like you did. And I think I'm going to have to give us. So I have like a little plan that I started thinking of. I'm like, I'm probably going to start it pretty soon. This, my development is not there's a lot of hills. It's not the longest in the world to run around it, but there's a lot of hills, and that's a challenge in itself. And I think that'll kind of get me, if I can do that, say 2-3 times a week, and then in between do some other stuff, that'll be good. But say 2-3 times a week, especially 2 times out of the main work week, make sure I get up extremely early, and get out 6:30, 7, just before everybody else wakes up, get that done, and then come back and, walk the dog and, shower and help take care of the baby and get to work. So I'm gonna try and start doing that. But one other thing I will say, Jennifer alluded to this, as far as me, DJing. I DJ. I started a while back. My wife, got me like this DJ controller set, and she was like, "Yeah, you're gonna be DJing my events," because she knows how much I love music and I'm into it. And at first I didn't think too much of it. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I can do that every now and then." But she got me like some real professional stuff. So I was like, "Oh man, I got to step my game up, man. I got to build my skills. I can't just get out there and just make a playlist, a Spotify playlist." So I really got into it, and it's really boosted like my creativity a lot. Like the stuff that I can do, with the music and with the DJing is great. So like just mentally, I noticed that it's a fun hobby, but it's also something where I think it's like self-care, like the music and the blends that I do and all the different creativity that I use coming up with things. That's good in itself as well. So I've worked a little bit on the creativity side. Now I got to work some more, get back on the physical side. And obviously, like you say, always, like you mentioned, Travell, God, that you always have to spend time with God. You have to spend time in prayer. So that's always been big with me. I need to get a little bit better. I'm telling you, this pandemic way of life and stuff like that, and virtual and everything. I got to get back out there. You got to make sure we start going back to church physically, even though we check it out, online. We need to go back to church a little bit more, and just different things. But I'm definitely a work in progress right now. I just wanted to be honest about it. But I am aware of that, and I'm definitely have never been aware about the 1 in 10 statistic either, that you mentioned, Jennifer, about the postpartum for the dads. So that's really interesting to hear. But it just lets you know how important it is for everyone to make sure that they take care of themselves and pay attention to themselves as well.
For me, I never thought I would get almost addicted to watching the sunrise. I felt like, oh, I missed it. Like I love, having that quiet time where the sunrise, the birds are chirping, and it just, there's a certain calmness before the chaos of the day begins. But I was even thinking about health-wise, I'm not sure of everyone else's age, but I know Jason and I, we had children in our 40s. So making sure that we have the energy as well as the longevity, to see my youngest. Okay, I'm 40 when I had my third child. I want to, so I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to be, in my 60s when she finishes college. And you start doing the math.
Oh,
and
now you reminded me how old I am, man.
But we're in the same boat. We're in the same boat. But if I want to be alive and healthy, to walk them down the aisle when they get married, or to see my grandchildren and stuff like that, you have to start taking care of yourself. So all that stuff, Jennifer can tell you, from the exercise to the sodium to the sugar to all that stuff, because hey, I don't want my wife to be a widow raising children alone, and I don't want my child to somehow feel slighted that she didn't get the best years of me because I had her at a later stage in life. So that health becomes not just for you; it comes it's for your children as well.
Exactly. And thank you for bringing that up, because now you're about to turn me into a morning person, because I know I need to do it, but it'll give me stuff to even look forward to. But no, I mean, look, I'm older than you guys. I'm at the end of this month, I turned 49. So believe me, I just had a baby at 46, about to turn 47. Her birthday's a little bit before mine. So believe me, it's always been on my mind about, I'm not in horrible shape, but if you start getting lax, before you know it, you will be in horrible shape. So I need to stay on the grind with that and really take care of myself. And I just, you guys are being a great influence. Like, in hearing all this is great. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing, like you said, mentioned earlier, adaptation and finding that balance. And it's funny that the two of you mentioned being a morning person, because that used to be me. I used to get up real early, and I still get up early, but it's not to get up and work out and do things like that. It's to get up and get ready for work. So for me, it's hard for me to find that balance, because I'm going. I get up, I hit the street doing landscaping 7:30 in the morning. I may work. Sometimes I get home, it's dark, and then I'm trying to do t-shirts or something. So yeah, I do miss out, and that's something I've been trying to do better on. I do miss out on the family time. I do miss out on spending that quality time with my wife or with the kids. Now, like I say, been trying to do better, have been doing better, but you use the word slighted. I think Terrell used the word slight. I have felt bad sometimes, because I feel like I'm slighting my family, because on one end I'm thinking, man, I have to provide. Got kids in college, they need cars, they need this, they need that. But then, like you said, on the other side, they're not getting anything of me. So that has been something that I've been trying to do. And unfortunately, now with me and my lovely wife Dana, it's funny you made the joke about watching an episode of Good Times, whatever. Now my wife, she loves cartoons, so it's gonna be Tom and Jerry, the Jetsons, the Flintstones, things like that. But you know what, during that time, that's how we connect. Or something we do, I make sure I at least ask her about her day. And whether the explanation is 5 minutes or 20 minutes, I sit there and listen, because not only to her is it just telling me about her day, that may be a way for her to de-stress, So I'm trying to be present, be more conscious of being present, be there as more of that supportive husband, and not just a providing husband, if that makes sense. So for me, it has been trying to find that balance. I'm going to share something with Jen, and I don't think she would mind me sharing this. We just recently, back in March. Now, my wife and I, we've been together 23 years, 21 years of marriage will come July 6th, you know. Very thankful for that and hope to see many more. But a sad thing, so to speak, is we just took our first family vacation together this past March. Now, with that said, we've taken the kids, we've been plenty of places. We've been New Orleans, we've been to Canada, we've been on Beale Street, we've been quite a few places, but it was always with someone else or another group of people or something like that. It had never been myself, Dana, and our kids. You know, so I was very happy to do that, but at the same time, I felt like I was so far behind. You know, I hear couples, they're 25 years old, they've been married maybe 3 years, and they're taking a vacation every year. Or I know some of my friends, every year they take a vacation. I got one, I tease him, hey, what's going on, right? Oh, we out in the Caribbean, so we're here, we're there, you know. And I think that is so awesome. So my mindset sometimes is this, man, go out there and get that money so you can do that for your wife, do that for your family, for your kids. But sometimes we get so tunnel vision on providing that we miss it over here. And like you say, if you're not careful, that can cause problems. And I don't know Malik or Travell said it. I don't want it to be a situation. Now I will share with you, all our kids are grown. All our kids are grown, but we're still young. I'm 46 years old. My kids range from 19 to 27. All right. So you all were talking about earlier, Travell, Emily, about being older and stuff like that. You know, the kids, you'll be at a certain age when the kids graduate. Now, I did it the other way around. I think I got it messed up. Back in the day, they said the more kids you had, better off you were financially. I got caught up in the wrong time zone, y'all. I guarantee you, the more you have now, the more expensive they are. But with that said, with that said, it makes it a little easier, maybe, so to speak, because like they are grown right now at 46. So my thing is always, I told Dana, shoot, we can live our life now. It's time for us to live our life. But I don't know if there's really a certain age number to where you do that, you know. But to bring it all back full circle, my thing is, and it's very, very important to find that balance, you know, be able to adapt. And that's something I'm working on. And I hope we have another panel at some point, or so we can update each other or talk about this, kind of see, you know, how far we've made it evolve, you know, since this call.
I appreciate you saying something about vacation. Everything I'm saying, I have not attained. My wife is probably somewhere watching. So I hope you go back and watch and replay over and over again everything you're saying, because I'm going to hold you accountable to the things you said. But vacations, that's something I've had a problem with. My wife's family grew up annual vacation. My family, we didn't go on vacation. So for me, vacation was a luxury expense, almost an unnecessary expense. What's the return on spending all this money to travel, hotels and all that kind of stuff? But when I went, we finally took one. You realize that one of the reasons you make money is to create memories.
Yes, sir.
What did you do with the money that you made? And when it's all said and done, your children often will forget the things you give them, but they won't forget the memories that you shared with them. And so I was even challenged recently. It was like, okay, if you were on your deathbed and someone was to ask you, do you have any regrets? What would your regrets be? And oftentimes is, I wish I had spent more time with my family. What are you going to sit and talk about in the hospital at the North? You're going to talk about those fond memories, not the toys, not the clothes, not the houses, but those fond memories. And so I got convicted. I got to do better, even if it isn't the $10,000 trip to Disney World every year. Hey, can we go somewhere local for 3 days? 3 days, 2 nights.
Mhm.
Can we do one of these timeshares? It's free if you come sit through a presentation. I mean, can we do something? Because once again, time passes so fast.
It does.
And time is the ultimate currency.
And so if you don't take advantage of it while you can, it'll quickly pass you by and you'll be regretting, not having taken those moments to breathe in and take in those moments that God affords you.
Yes, sir. Hey, allow me to ask you a quick question.
Hmm.
How does a kid spell love? A little rhetorical question. I'm not really asking for an answer, but for me, what I've heard, the way they spell love is Time.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely.
You know, and when I was told, and I'll be transparent with you right now. When that came up, it made me feel so bad because as much as I enjoy being a father, for me, it's a blessing to be a father because of what I didn't have coming up, right? But I felt so bad once going back again to the providing and doing other stuff. Coming up, my 80% of that time spent was my wife with our kids, right? Because I was out trying to do this business or do this or do that, traveling, doing this or that. So I missed a lot of that. And for me, and I know this may sound crazy, and not to exclude my kids, because in a way I feel I can't make up that time. Now I can do better with them going forward, but I'm gonna tell you something. I am so looking forward to when our kids have kids, because I almost feel like even though I shouldn't look at them as a makeup, I know better now. I'm able to do better now, and it's unfortunate that my kids won't get it, but at least their kids get it. So it's somewhere I can kind of start that, if you want to call it, that legacy of showing love through time, if that makes sense.
And I think the saving grace for fathers is recognizing with that time, it's not necessarily quantity but quality.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you all of me, undivided, fully, for this amount of time that we have.
Mhm.
And so working, okay, fine. We're working 12, 14 hours a day. You're working 6, 7 days a week. You're working 50. But when I do give you time, you got it. I'm not texting. I'm not on the phone. You got me. And I think that's important that we, and time is something you have to schedule. Just like you schedule your appointments, you also have to schedule quality time. Because if you don't, something will always encroach on that time. So I'm blocking out this hour. I'm blocking out this afternoon. I'm blocking out this day of the month. I'm blocking out this week of the year. Like, you have to be just as intentional and proactive about budgeting that time for your spouse, for God, for your family. Otherwise, it will always be something that comes up that robs your family of it.
Yeah, and that's so true. And you mentioned earlier about being, if you're on your deathbed or whatever, and the things that the things you may regret, or things your kids gonna remember. And one thing, and I hope God's will is for me to live many, many, many more years, because regardless of how things started, I hope that when that time comes, that our kids will know that they are loved. And when I say that they are loved, I want them to know that they're life's only valid expression, if that makes sense. I want them to remember dad for loving them, being there, and not just providing for them. Because I don't want them to carry that same thing into their marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I tell them, try to find balance. And it's crazy because I'm telling them this, and you got to be careful, because a lot of them don't listen to what you say. They see what you do. So I make a joke and say they listen to what you do, right? So I'm telling them about balance, but still, here's dad still working 12, sometimes 17 hours a day. But I'm glad we're having this panel discussion, because just hearing some of your stories and what you're going through is really motivating me to be even more intentional on making those changes. So I appreciate you all. Really do.
Hey, all of you. I mean, this is this, and I like what you said, Tavari, about a follow-up to kind of measure progress at some point. Yeah. So let's talk pregnancy and postpartum. When you hear names like Kira Johnson, Dr. Shalon Irving, Sha'asia Washington, Olympic gold medalist Tori Bowie, and just so many moms who have lost their lives prematurely due to pregnancy-related complications. Every year, 50 to 60,000 moms experience life-threatening pregnancy complications.
Wow.
And, a lot of times, as we know, these, moms who have survived, thankfully, but, they may carry physical and or, mental trauma from that experience, as well as dads, right? Black women and babies are impacted at a disproportionately higher number in this statistic. And data shows that at least 80% of these deaths, as well as the complications, are preventable. Malik, I know because you do work in a healthcare setting, you kind of close, have seen these things maybe in closer lens. And then there are others of you who may have experienced different things in your own pregnancies. So I want to know, how do these statistics, first of all, make you feel?
Well, I'll kind of jump in. I mean, I believe they're looking at the ages of all of us. That me, my wife, and I might have been some of the older ones to actually have more recently given birth. So I knew a lot of the statistics. I definitely knew about the the infant or the maternal mortality rate in Georgia was one of the highest. I knew that in the nation. Some statistics I do know, some I don't. But I also knew, just in fact, that what do they call, like, as soon as you're 35, they consider it a geriatric pregnancy. So we were way beyond just geriatric. We were pregnant, but in my mind, it was all a blessing, and it was like a beautiful pregnancy. I mean, everything just went amazing. All thanks to God. It was truly a blessing, because I was worried most of the time. Like, I think I was more worried than Tess was. Tess was just enjoying pregnancy, and she's just gung ho and just moves ahead with stuff. And I tend to be sometimes the worrier. So I was like worrying. I was like, man, I hope everything's okay with her. Blah blah blah. This. And we were just truly blessed. I mean, in the delivery room, everything went, pretty like well. I think one of the, things that, you might have wanted to mention to us was, asking if there was anything we needed to do as far as like advocating, for our wives up in the delivery room. Fortunately for us, in our particular case, nothing like that kind of like came up. But I will say there was one, pretty scary moment where, after she gave birth, there was a lot of stuff that needed to be taken care of. And, even though, Tess didn't quite know what was going on, maybe because, whatever med she was on, she's sitting there joking and stuff. But, basically they had to kind of take her away and do kind of like a quick, somewhat of like a quick slight emergency thing to take care of it. And I'm sitting there holding this beautiful child that's like barely an hour old. And I was just kind of like, I know I had to be there for her and just like comfort her and everything, but I didn't know what was going on. So I'm like holding the baby there for, 30, 40 minutes. And then finally I, get one of the nurses. I'm like, can you give me some clue about what's going on with my wife? Is she okay? And eventually they kind of got back to me and let me know she was fine, and everything, worked out okay. But, those are the types of moments that kind of jump out in your mind when you hear about, I kind of call us jokingly like an extra geriatric pregnancy. We were kind of like on the higher end towards things. And, it's just always on your mind. So, we, took a certain, course, we got all this information about making sure that, we hold the the doctors and everyone in the delivery room accountable for certain things, that we make sure that she's fully comfortable, all these different things that we would need to advocate for and be aware of. We were, taking that course over several weeks. We took together, we were both on the same page, and, I knew what I needed to do. I'm kind of like a, low key guy. I don't really like, I'm not the big loud shouting type of guy all the time, but if I had to get to that point, I was going to do it, because I knew, what the setting needed to be. I knew what things needed to be provided. But it's always good to have that education and be prepared ahead of time. So, but yeah, these statistics that you hear about all the time, man, it's a lot, and it's very real. And you just want everyone to kind of be aware of these things and be aware of how they need to advocate for themselves. I am only in marketing, but I get to see like all the content that comes through about these things. So I'm very aware of what's going on. I just thought, up in front and center with all the blood and everything to kind of like deal with that, because I'm not a doctor. But yeah, I'm highly aware of these things, and I think anyone, both the mom and the dad need to be highly aware of these things ahead of time with pregnancy, and take these courses, find do as much research, and know what you need to to have available and ready for you when you go into that delivery room.
And for me, it's kind of just a constant reminder of, that it can really happen to any of us. We could all find ourselves in that situation. I know when we had our daughter, I kind of grown accustomed to what you see from a pregnancy on TV. And so like Jennifer's water broke when it was only at 31 weeks old. And at first, she's like, I think my water broke. And I was like, it wasn't like it was on TV, where it's just like this bunch of water. It's like, oh, my water broke. I was like, are you sure? I was like, so I'm sitting there looking at YouTube.
He watched a 30-minute YouTube video before he believed me that my water broke.
But it confirmed that it wasn't. But we're in the hospital. We're in the hospital for 2 weeks. She's keeping the baby inside for basically almost another 2 weeks, so she can have more time to develop. And then even after that, she's premature, so she's in the NICU. And we had kind of all these encounters with the doctors and the nursing staff, some positive, some not so positive. And you kind of learn about the subtle ways in which racism can impact the pregnancy process. For example, like my wife had a doula, and the doula was adamant about, getting her set up on breastfeeding and making sure, it happens on time. And the person who the hospital has on staff, whose job that is, didn't even want to do it, because she basically didn't want to touch my wife.
Wow.
And then I remember hearing how Keisha Knight Pulliam, I read a story how Keisha Knight Pulliam complained about that. That's Rudy from the Cosby Show. She complained about that when she gave birth, how the nurse who was supposed to help her to lactate basically didn't want to have anything to do with her, because she didn't want to be hands-on with this person.
Also another Atlanta hospital.
Yes. And so, it's just, in a way, hearing about these stories reminds you how blessed I was that it turned out positive, because there are other people who it did not go well. Like you mentioned, the Olympic athlete this week, they found her at 8 months pregnant. She died from preeclampsia. And this is somebody who won a gold medalist on one of the Olympic relay teams. She's in peak physical condition. So if it can happen to her, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's funny, Jason, you mentioned about, with Jayla, who, if y'all don't know, Jayla Ann Rose runs the house down there. She is the diva, just in case you didn't know. But with that said, all our kids, the 3 kids between my wife and I, they were all preemies. Our twins, they were born at 25 weeks, a pound apiece. So as men, we're taught to be strong, supportive, rock hard. And during that time, Dana went through a lot. For example, she couldn't even keep any food down. Even to water, she couldn't keep water down. She lost 27 pounds during the pregnancy with the twins, which I think I picked up. But nonetheless, seeing her go through that was really hard. You know, because I felt like I couldn't do anything to help. All I could do sometimes was just rub her back or whatever. But even doing that, I just didn't feel like I was doing enough, or I felt helpless maybe, that I couldn't do more to help out. But Jason, you're talking about, you know, the different information you got. I remember the neonatologist telling us, you know, they would come every day and they said, well, if the twins, if they make it through this night, no, they have a 5% chance living. You know, if they make it through 2 nights, it's 7% chance. I will say this: I never fretted that those kids would not live. Now the hard part was trying to get through that, being strong for my wife, because even though I didn't feel they may pass, I always felt there would be something wrong with them being born that early, because you get to reading up on stuff when you go through things like that. So that was very hard. But having to watch her go through that, it did something to me. You know, I don't know. You get to that part and you just feel helpless. You're thankful, but you feel helpless. You know, so yeah. Without take a deep breath here, but I will say I was glad I was able to be there with my wife, for lack of another word, to advocate, to be there to support her through all of this. Wouldn't want to go through it again. Well, we kind of went through it again with our last child, but not as bad. Bobby was, I think, right at 3 pounds, so it wasn't as bad. But with the twins, I mean, it was a 3-month stay, for example, for our daughter. Our son, he was, for the lack of a word, he was pretty sick, you know, so he had to stay in the NICU a lot longer. Now, I will tell you, that was another hard thing. You got one kid with you, but the other kid is over at the hospital in the NICU.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a hard one also. You know, would not want to do it again, but if I had to do it again, I'd do it again with the same lady, you know, especially if I know the outcome will be the same, you know. But Jennifer, you asked a question and you gave a statistic, and recently, within the last year, kind of went through this with a family member, and I found out more about the stats during that time, you know, within miscarriages or stillborn babies and things like that. When he said 25%, at least 25% it happens, you know, and that's a general stat. But within the Black community, he said it's 40%. Mm-hmm. You know, my question, and I asked the doctor this, and he couldn't give me an answer. You know, I said, why is that so much more prevalent in the Black community? And I have a question, Malik. You said that Georgia has one of the highest percentages. Do you have any idea why that is? Because now my mind is kind of coming over here. How does one state lead something like that? What is it about that state? Is it lithium in the water? You know, I'm just, you know, I don't know.
No, I mean, it really is, you know, we're, you know, if we need to say the quiet part out loud, it really is exactly what we think it is. There's a lot of health disparities. Most of the times they're along the lines of, you know, economic and racial lines almost all the time. And we know the reason for that. It's quite, you know, some of the stuff, you know, like Jason just mentioned, and also what both Jason and Jennifer mentioned about like the Olympian, that still persists. There are specific things that are being set up on the federal level now to kind of combat the racism that exists that causes these health disparities and these disparities in disease treatment and all these different things. But I'm not saying that's the only thing that plays a part, but it's a large part of it. So if you can take that out, or at least address that head on, a lot, it'll start coming a lot more closer to being like more even along the lines of, whenever these, diseases or things happen, or certain things happen, it'll be like the same percentage, almost the same percentage amongst, each race or each, economic line or whatever. So it is exactly. I don't want to cut you off because I know you were still talking, but it really is that.
I wanted to jump in too and say, Georgia, we're number two. And so Louisiana is the only state that is ahead of Georgia. And I can't speak to Louisiana as much to Louisiana, but like Malik was saying, Georgia, the problem here is multifaceted. And unfortunately, not a quick fix. One of the positives, Georgia did recently expand coverage, postpartum coverage for moms, I think up to 12 months after, birth. But that being said, we have a ways to go. We just had a major, Georgia has several medical deserts or deserts pertaining to maternal care deserts. And so most people pregnant in this state do not live within driving distance to a doctor, a nurse, maybe even a pharmacy, right? So we have maternal care deserts, yet we just had a very major hospital to close down in Atlanta that actually served that particular population in large part, right? So now we have hospitals that were already overcrowded, right, or even worse at this time. That's one of the issues. We also have a lot of food deserts here. And so that, of course, contributes to lack of nutrition. While, of course, economics, of course, play a role, one of the interesting stats say that, Black women in particular are actually more likely to succumb to maternal mortality and morbidity with more education and income, as opposed to those with lesser. I mean, including myself, you would think that it would be the other way around. So earlier I mentioned Dr. Shalon Irvin. She was a PhD researcher and employee at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And her work in large part actually dealt with, the health of moms and pregnancy and maternal health. And so the irony that she would lose her life to preeclampsia while in that role, right, is beyond comprehension. It's just beyond comprehension. And so I think that, and of course, there's no quick fix, and I'm one person, but the transparency in the hospitals that do exist here, I think we need more transparency. Bias is a significant issue. It just is. There's significant bias. When you talk about Kira Johnson, this is Judge Hatchett's daughter-in-law, whose son lives here in Atlanta, is very much of a maternal health advocate because of what happened to his now late wife. He's raising his boys. And these are people who, well-educated, quote unquote, they've done well. And this took place, his wife hemorrhaged. He complained for hours and hours and hours that, his wife was bleeding while in the hospital. And they said, oh, it was not as important, right, as other people or other things. And so we know what happened, right? She bled out. And so, when you look at that neglect that takes place based on, nurses or staff that decides whose demands are more important than others based on something that is not about, medicine, right? That's a problem. And so, it's a multifaceted problem. And it's one that I hope we can come together and address, especially here in Georgia, because as someone who is a public health leader, at the time I worked a pretty senior public health leadership position for the state of Georgia. And the irony of me sitting in a hospital bed, right? With this public health education, and I can recite stats from the top of my head, but it did not matter, right? Because I found myself nearly losing my life because of negligence, right? And so I think for me, that's been one of the hardest things for me to overcome, was the, how could this happen to me? Like how, and so I say that to say, going back, circling back, I think Jason said, unfortunately, it just can happen to all of us. And it's a problem. It's a problem. And so all of us are blessed who are on here that, we we have, healthy, happy children, and we're in great health. I know we talked about, doing better with exercise, et cetera. I just wanted to jump in and say that. But I think
I'm glad we're doing a conversation like this, because, until it becomes a conversation where everybody cares, where it's not just something that the mothers care about, but the dads are jumping in, caring about it also, things won't get done, because I believe that the states in which they make it a priority, they have much better statistics regarding their health outcomes. And, in Georgia, unfortunately, I feel that it's just kind of neglected. Too many people want to look at, the rosy picture of pregnancy and just focus on that without looking at the problems. And even people who are diligent, like I'll never forget, during Jennifer's pregnancy, she was very much concerned about, and actually asked her doctor at one point, what can I do, to make sure that I don't become a statistic? And this particular doctor's response was, well, unfortunately, people die.
Wow.
And we quickly found another doctor.
And I'll point out, this was a Black provider.
Right.
This was a Black provider. So
that's why I think it's definitely more layers than even the race and economics and education. I said to the statistics, I'm fortunate because my wife should be added to that number. She was 25 when she gave birth to our first child. And I even go back to what Jason said about the importance of education. I knew of people who had been on bed rest, blood pressure, or whatever, but I never heard that phrase of preeclampsia or postpartum preeclampsia. So pregnancy, fine, no blood pressure issues. My first child was past due, but they didn't want to induce until my wife's blood pressure shot up. We rushed her to the hospital. They induced the labor. But one of the things I find with the healthcare system, I don't think we give women enough time to recover. There's such a rush to get them in and get them out. And I think the health insurance and that economics of healthcare, to where we don't really prioritize the health of mothers, from even when do they take maternity leave, pre-birth, you got 6 weeks, but it's unpaid. Post-birth, you had the baby today, you got to be checking out the hospital tomorrow. When do we give the women time to go through this traumatic physical experience and monitor closely on the front end and on the back end? So my wife has postpartum preeclampsia, blood pressure shoots up, has the baby, and the argument was, well, she's had the baby, that's the cure. For many, it is. So things seem to be okay. They send her home, probably within that 2 to 3 days, whatever's the normal time. She gets home and she's basically becomes non-responsive. Her blood pressure has shot up. It was over 200, the top number, over something in the 160. She should have had a stroke. They rush her in. She's in CCU. I'm watching her body seizing, periodically as she's fighting for her life. I'm bedside with her. Our newborn is staying with a nearby relative. It kind of gets under control. They're ready to send her home, kind of that rush. Let's get you home. You need to be with your baby. Best thing to get home. And I remember she asked for something to drink. I went and got her something to drink. I reached to hand it to her, and she didn't respond. Her blood pressure had shot back up again. And they rushed her out of the room. and to see the fear in the doctor's eyes just shook me even more to the core, because someone on the same floor at the same time had died from the same condition. Now, this was a Black doctor. I think one of the things that we experienced, though, she had a primary African-American physician, but so many of these doctors' offices, you don't necessarily see the same person each time.
Right.
So they don't know, they read a chart, but they really don't get to know you. They don't get to know your story. Yeah, she was there at the delivery, but wherever the case may be. So thankfully, you know, after that third bout, she comes home, she's on blood pressure medicine for a period of time, no problem. During that transition of figuring out kind of what to do next, she gets pregnant again. And so now it's like, oh my goodness, you just nearly lost your life. Now you're pregnant again. Is this going to happen again? So then everybody's like, okay, you're high risk. We're going to monitor it. But even then, second child was past due. They said, we're not going to induce, because right now we don't see any issues with the blood pressure. And I remember being in the hospital when she was scheduled to be induced. They're like, well, we're going to start the process. Y'all go home and come back tomorrow. And I'm like, you're inducing her because she's late. I mean, she's past due. She had preeclampsia. And even though it's not high, can't you see the monitor? It is increasing. She needs to stay. Well, let's go talk to this one. Let's go talk to that one. This goes down. So thankfully, they kept her because it continued to increase. Now, thankfully, not as high as the first time, but she gives birth, and thinking that birth relieves it, supposed to come down, it stays elevated. Doesn't spike, but stays elevated. And so I'm home with a 1-year-old and a 1-week-old. So the 1-year-old is into everything, while the 1-week-old is asleep. But then the 1-week-old had colic. So when it's time to go to sleep, she's stirring it up. So I'm around the clock at home watching a 1-year-old and a 1-week-old, while my wife is in the hospital by herself this time. First time I slept at the hospital. This time, and she's having anxiety because her blood pressure will go up at night when it should go down when you're sleeping. So thankfully, you know, once again, she relieved from that, take blood pressure medicine for a period of time, no lingering side effects. Fast forward 8 years later, she's pregnant again, but this time we live in Richmond versus Hampton. And the experience with the doctors, they were not African-American, but they looked at her history and said, oh no, we're not going to let this happen to you again. We're going to monitor you closely. And if you're even in the 110s and go up to the 120s, we're going to take proactive steps. They made up their mind that, they end up pulling her out of work a month before the due date. We're not playing with this. Where the other two, they waited post the due date to induce. When they saw a slight uptick, they're like, oh, we're going to schedule this induction almost like it was like a week or 10 days. Or, oh no, we're not playing with this. In the hospital, oh yeah, your blood pressure is fine. Oh, but we're going to keep you here extra 2 days to make sure that it don't spike after delivery like the other 2 times. And so it was a totally different experience, not because the race of the doctors, it was just that it seemed like these doctors just took it more seriously.
Right.
And more proactive in prevention, whereas the others like, oh, it's like it's natural for it to happen. And we just gonna see what happens, and we're gonna let it take care of itself. If it works, it works. If it don't, it works. But this one's like, no, we're not playing with you. And so thankfully, you know, she got induced, she had the delivery, came home within the 2 days, never had the blood pressure issues, never had to go on BP meds, perfect delivery. And at this time, an older woman, you know, but thankfully everything was smooth. So when I hear those statistics, I say fortunate because we should be those statistics. And then for God to bless us, her to give birth 3 times and to survive, and the children are normal, she's healthy. I'm grateful. But all the things that go through your mind, all the things that go through just, like you said, being helpless, you're inside and you're trying to figure out what to do. You know what the statistics look like, but I'm grateful that things worked out the way that they did for my family.
Awesome. And so it's Travell, and so glad to hear that everything worked out. But a funny take for me off of that story is when you're talking about your wife got pregnant, like she drank the juice she wasn't supposed to drink, like she got pregnant by a second time.
Yeah.
Like it just happened. He ain't nothing to do with it. He ain't nothing about it. Yeah.
Trying to figure out what to do next, and in that process of trying to figure out what to do next, things happen. So, everybody then looking at me like, how dare you put her in that predicament, knowing what she just went through, but it wasn't, it wasn't intentional. So you just start, praying and asking God for wisdom and direction. But yeah, just like almost what you said, like one set of doctors is very nonchalant. It is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be, but it's going to let nature take its course. Whereas the others, even if we can't prevent it or stop it, we're going to do everything in our power and our resources to make sure you do not experience what you've experienced before. And I am forever grateful for the team that we had with the third child that we didn't have with the first 2.
And that I was going to say, Travell, that's a powerful testimony because, and then on top of that, again, like I said, it's not like a race thing. It's in a lot of cases, it's a bias that exists within the industry. And, it doesn't matter what race of people are. If you're taking things seriously, you're doing things the right way. If you're being nonchalant, like you mentioned, even though they had an example a year earlier of what happened, and they still were, that's what got me. The second child, I was like,
so I don't know if that's health insurance. I don't know if that's hospital policy. I don't know where that trickles down.
Yeah.
Where it's really almost like a baby factory. All right, just get them in, have a baby, get them out, versus, okay, we're going to take care of you throughout the process.
I think everyone knows that, beds opening is a big deal, like getting new patients in is a big deal for all hospitals, right? For making money. But hospitals also don't want to get sued. So I would think they will be more careful about making sure that they, do the right thing and make sure that people are okay before they let them go. Because that being sued is a whole lot more than whatever little bit of money you miss from that 1 extra day or 2 extra days of someone staying in the bed. Mm-hmm. But maybe some hospitals are getting the picture now. I'm glad to hear that one in Richmond of all places. I used to live in Richmond. That Richmond of all places did a much better job. That's amazing to hear.
I think it's interesting because we're talking about conditions like preeclampsia, which by the way I had as well, Travell. Postpartum, I didn't experience any of that during the pregnancy itself, but our stay was in the hospital was very much prolonged. We know that maternal care is expensive. As I think Malik brought up earlier, if you're 35 or over 35, there's high risk, right, testing and things that take place. And so Jason, Jason loves numbers. He loves to remind me of what things cost. He's a bankruptcy attorney. Something else that he left out of his introduction earlier. He's a bankruptcy attorney. He's a U.S. trustee, and and I understand because of course he works on a daily basis with people who find themselves in pretty challenging financial situations.
But Jennifer, he is Mason Petty's son.
Foremost, yeah.
That's all I will say. That predates law school. He is Mason Petty's son.
Okay. We'll have to talk. So I want you to kind of speak to the sticker shock around when we, at least like when we got our bill, or just like when you see debtors, and to the extent that medical debt, contributes to their financial situations, and how this may not only, of course, adversely impact, our physical and mental health, but our financial health as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak on that. One of the statistics that they always put out is how, so many of the people who end up filing bankruptcy, medical debt is a significant factor that contributed to that. But it's not just the medical debt, it's what goes along with it, going through a situation where you incur medical debt. It's time away from work and the disruption to income. And so that doesn't get discussed often enough. And so for anybody out there who's considering having a baby, you can put yourself in a much better position if you at least try to think about some of those expenses that you might incur. One significant thing, I would, having been through our experience, I couldn't imagine going through this process without health insurance. That would terrify me. It's just, just seeing the bills that we receive and knowing that I'm seeing this total amount, and they were like, oh, you don't have to pay this. This is what we already paid. I think when we were in the hospital, approximately about 24 days total, 24 days straight. At one point, the doctor came to me. I'm sitting there, and she's like, "Why don't you go home?" She's like, "You're just sitting here." I'm like, "Well, my whole family's here. Where am I going?"
Exactly.
But and we're there where it's getting more and more expensive. Fortunately, we did have insurance. I joked with Jennifer about every fifth day they would come in and do this celebration meal. I guess for most people, they were celebrating you having the baby and going home. They kept celebrating with us, like we're still here. We're not having the baby yet.
For celebration.
You get the nice meal. You get the steak that night, and they bring a little champagne thing. Jennifer was like, "Well, what are we celebrating?" I was like, "They're celebrating getting more money from us."
Well, there you go.
But so I would say that a couple of things you could do to prepare yourself are, like I say, try your best before you get pregnant to have health insurance, to have some type of coverage to take care of those expenses. You can also try to, when you do your
Jason, I think you cut out.
time.
Well, let me piggyback on him something why he cut out. In addition to health insurance, I always advise people to get that short-term disability
Yes.
insurance, so that when you're out for those 6 weeks, you have some type of income. That is so stressful to have a baby. Jason, I remember, you remember the young lady that had a baby, was back in class 2 weeks later, because 2 weeks later, because we had an attendance policy, but for many to take time off, at 12 weeks, I'm sorry, you get to 12 weeks unpaid, but it's unpaid. And if you take a month before and 8 weeks after, unless you have a working spouse, but even if you're working spouse, if that income is gone for 12 weeks, and with all the expenses of the newborn baby. So short-term disability insurance, in addition to health insurance, especially for moms.
You talk about like even other countries don't do this, right?
It's paid.
I think the other countries like Canada, we said like 6 months. I mean, it's a ridiculous difference. And you talk about like self-care, mental health, all the different things that can happen with having a child, with having a baby, pregnancy, all this type of stuff, and delivery. Then on top of that, you got a couple of weeks to possibly, and then if you take a little bit over that, it's unpaid, or if you don't have the short-term disability or long-term disability. Why is there so much pressure on us? Like everything's about money, 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 money. We need to start. There needs to be some major changes on a federal, national level to kind of help out with some of these things, and I think we will have much better outcomes with that. I'm sorry to get on my soapbox, but that's crazy. I mean, there was, like I said, Tess, she works with like, in racing and stuff, and one of the people she works with, one of the companies she works with is Lululemon, which is Canadian based. And one of the employees had gotten pregnant there. She took a maternity leave, and she had like half a year off paid.
Hey,
Wow.
wow.
Crazy.
Wow.
Like Mike say, they don't really care about us. Wow.
Let me add to just a little a plug. The 5K that Malik is referring to is the race. It's amazing. Jason and I have taken part in it. Tavari, I think we invited you and Zaina as well. So yes, just wanted to throw that quick plug.
I see, Travell, I was trying to be like, I was trying to, kind of keep things, like how you, how you chill about the book and all that. I was trying to, but thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. As much as we can get that word out, that's great. First week of October, by the way.
Our dads are very humble, so they all have lots going on. Travell has an amazing book that we were talking about earlier. So yes.
Quick question. I apologize. Go ahead, Jen. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Malik, it's funny. I'm doing a 5K and host the 5K in October. What part of October, my friend?
Ours is always the first week, so I believe it's going to be either like somewhere around I think it's either the 4th, 5th, 6th, somewhere around there. It's a whole weekend.
Mine's the last week. Okay, so now,
Be sure to forward you the
where are
info.
you located again?
Huh?
Where are you located again?
Atlanta.
Oh yeah, I'm in Atlanta. Yeah.
I can make that one, and maybe you can come up this way. We 2 hours from each other. Mine's at the end of October, so
okay, we'll see what we can do.
It's schedule fits, man.
Okay, that sounds
Then we
good.
got everybody taking care of our families. You know what I'm saying?
There you go. Dad's getting
Yes,
fit.
definitely getting fit. That's right.
Yeah, it is.
I love it.
Back to you.
Well, thank you all so much. Malik, Jason, Tavari, Travell, this has been an amazing conversation. In case you all are not as aware, you all are soaring as dads, even when you may not feel that it's the case, you're soaring. So I want to say a special thank you to Tess, Dana, Sharina, the awesome wives of our panel dads. I wish happy Father's Day to, yes, let's.
Yes. Clap up the wives. Clap up the wives.
Yes.
Exactly.
Happy Father's Day to all the dads, the not yet dads, the stepdads, the adoptive dads, the granddads, the dads who are no longer with us.
Yes.
So unless you all have any final words for the evening, I will wish you all a great night.
Thank you so much. I definitely wanted to, thank you for this opportunity, Jen, and happy Father's Day a little bit ahead of time to you. I salute you, fellas. Happy Father's Day to you all, and great meeting you and having in this panel. This is excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being transparent. I think that the depth of this conversation is directly correlated with just your transparency. So thank you.
You've inspired me to do more sessions like this for that transparency. And we could almost pull so many different topics and almost have a series just offer them. One thing I did want to PS on something I said earlier is, if going back to that education about the moms and knowing everything about pregnancy and being proactive and an advocate, if you're in a merry-go-round type doctor's office, it was such an advantage to make sure we scheduled appointments to make sure we saw the same person. Then you become not just a name or just a statistic or a number. You really do develop that rapport. And I think intrinsically, the doctor, in many cases, would then have a little bit more compassion and concern, because I know you as a person. You're not just somebody revolving in and out and somebody I read about on a chart. So even if you're in that type of practice, try to make sure, hey, when I want to see this doctor again, even if you have to even research who is the best maternity doctor in that practice or in that community, I want them. Because I think just like we select many other things, selecting the right hospital, selecting the right medical practice, selecting the right doctor, being educated, being an advocate, it is critical. It's critical for a positive outcome.
And I'll just piggyback off of what Travell said. I agree 110%. And also pool your resources. Sometimes accountability, I think also contributes to what Travell is describing to you. And I know for us, when we found ourselves in that predicament with the postpartum, preeclampsia, et cetera, I had actually had a infection that reached sepsis level as well. And so I called an OBGYN who's my cousin, who's all the way in Arizona, Dr. Lily Jordan. And even though she could not physically, right, be there to be my doctor, she was able to reach out to my providers and say, look, my cousin will not be one of your Georgia statistics. So if you do have those resources, I think it's also great to pull them together and include them as much as possible.
Exactly. That's good info, Jen.
Happy Father's Day to everybody.
Hey, happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day, guys.
Hey, again, Jennifer, thank you so very much for including me.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very appreciate it.
Likewise.